We begin today the Mishnah at Daf Mem Beis, Amud Beis. 2 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Sagt the Heilige Mishnah, Ve'elu Dvarim, it's these parts of a carbon, She'ein Chayavin Aleim Mishum Pigel. That if you eat from it, you will not be Chayav Kares for the Isser of Pigel. When a person thinks, when he's doing one of the main Avedis of the carbon, that he will eat it or bring the carbon on the Mizbeach, Shaloi Bizmanai, then the carbon itself, Pigel takes effect, and now if you eat from it, you chayiv kares. But these parts, you're not going to be chayiv if you eat from it kares. Hakaimitz. First example is the kaimitz, which is by a carbon mincha, when you take a fistful to be makriv it on the mizbeach. So if you eat from that kaimitz itself, you will not be chayiv kares for Pigel. What's the reason for this? So Rashi explains, because the way it works by Pigel is, there is the aveda that's done to be mater then other parts of this carbon to be brought on the mizbeach or to be eaten. But then there's the part that's actually burnt on the mizbeach where there's nothing that's here to be mater it, because it itself is what is being burnt on the mizbeach. And so therefore in such a case, the Pigel does not take effect. So this kaimitz, when you're makter on the mizbeach, what is the kaimitz supposed to do? The kaimitz is actually the one that's mater to eat the shirayim. That this kaimitz, when you bring it on the mizbeach, now the whatever is left from the mincha, that you could eat. But you can't say about this kaimitz that there's something else that's matter to eat this kaimitz. The concept of Pigel is only in a case where there's something else that came to be matter it. That's the concept by the kaimitz, and the same in the whole list that the Mishnah brings over here. This is the idea of why the chi of kares, eating this part of the carbon, will not take effect. And the same also with the ketayres that's brought, that's on the inside mizbeach. So you can't say regarding the ketayres that there's something else that's being mater this ketayres. The ketayres has to just be burnt completely on the mizbeach. The levayna is a frankincense that's brought with the carbon mincha, so it's also not something that a part of the carbon where there's another aveda that's mater it. This levayna just has to be burnt completely on the mizbeach. Or minchas kayanim, the carbon mincha that the kayanim brings. So regarding a mincha that a kayan brings, if he brings it even as a donation, then the halacha by a kayan, it says it has to be completely burnt on the mizbeach. There's no kemitze and then shirayim that you could say that Pigel takes effect, that there's what's left over that becomes mutter through the aveda that you do. It all has to be burnt completely on the mizbeach. So therefore the halacha, the chiyuv of kares, if you eat from it regarding Pigel, does not take effect. There's nothing else that's coming to be matter any part of it. It's all burnt on the mizbeach. Or minchas kayan mashiach, the carbon mincha that the kohen gadol brings every single day. You have to bring a carbon mincha every day. Half of it they burnt on the mizbeach in the morning and half in the evening, and that's something that's also burnt completely on the mizbeach. V'hadam, the blood from the carbon. If you eat from the blood of the carbon, so obviously you're not allowed to eat from the blood of the carbon, but the chi of kares of Pigel does not apply here, because the dam is what's matter something else. You can't say that there's something else that's matter to eat from this blood. Pigel only takes effect, the chi of kares, that is, you only be chai of kares if you eat from a part of the carbon that there was something else that was matter it, and if you add the machshava of Pigel, instead of being matter it brings the chi of kares on it. But if this is the dam itself that's supposed to be spread in the mizbeach, there's nothing to be matter it. So then if you would eat from this dam, there's no chi of kares of Pigel. And also v'hanesachim haboyen b'fnei atzmam, the nesachim that you bring on the mizbeach, they can be brought by themselves. What this refers to is a person could decide to make a donation that he's bringing nesachim for themselves. Nesachim, which is libations on the mizbeach, you pour the wine on the mizbeach, and a person can just bring that separately. Or also nesachim that are brought together with the karbanis. You're supposed to, many of the karbanis, you bring nesachim together with the karbanis. If there's flour and there's wine that's brought together with the karbanis, but it doesn't have to be brought together with the carbon on that same day. You could bring the carbon, and then the nesachim of the carbon is brought on a different day. So therefore, since it's brought on a different day, it's not connected to this carbon. So you can't say now regarding the nesachim that it depends, that it's being brought in the mizbeach depends on the carbon itself. That when the carbon is finished to be brought, then it's matter that these nesachim will be brought. Not because this nesachim are being brought on a different day. It's being brought separately. So therefore, there's no din of pigel if you eat from it. Divrei Rab Meir, this is Rab Meir's opinion. Chachamim say, Af haboyin im behema. These nesachim, even when you do bring it together with the carbon on the same day, still, because it could be brought separately, so that means that in essence it's something that is not necessarily dependent on the carbon to be matter to bring these nesachim then after you finish with the carbon. It could be brought separately, and when it's brought separately, it's an inyan for itself. Therefore, you can't say that there's the zevach, there's the carbon that's matter the nesachim. Right, so Rab Meir says it depends when the nesachim are being brought. If it's brought together with the carbon, so then I say that it is connected to the carbon. That if there's a pigul, a machshava of pigul on the carbon itself, then the nesachim, the chi of kares on the nesachim will take effect. But if you bring it on a separate day, so then it's not connected to the carbon. The Chachamim say it doesn't matter when it was brought, whether it was brought on the same day, whether it was brought on a separate day. I always say that it's considered to be independent, that it's not something that is becoming mutter through the carbon. Similar thing, a similar machlekes, loig shemen shal mitzaira, the loig of oil that's used by the mitzaira, that has to be placed in different places on the mitzaira's body. So this is also something that's brought together with the carbon asham of the mitzaira. And only after you place the bloods of the carbon asham on him, then on that same place, you then add and place the oil as well. Right, so seemingly, this oil could only be done and used after the carbon itself. And then when you finish placing that oil on those places in the mitzaira's body, what happens with the leftovers of the oil? You can eat the oil. So this is l'chayre a case where pigul should take effect, because you have the carbon itself, the asham, that when you're done with the asham, that's matter then to do the avodah with the, or what has to be done with the oil, and then it's matter to eat what's left over from the oil. So this is something that's becoming mutter through the carbon. That's something which pigul should take effect on. So, but the Mishnah here says that the loig shemen of this mitzaira, Rab Shimon says, Ein chayavin olav mishum pigul. You'll never be chayav on pigul for this, and the reason is because this oil that has to be placed on the mitzaira, usually it's done right after the carbon asham is brought, but it doesn't have to be done on the same day. Similar to what we said before regarding the nesachim, here as well it can be done, Rashi says, 10 days later. So because it's done separately, so therefore it's not necessarily connected to the carbon that's brought with it, and therefore you can't say about this loig of shemen that there's a carbon that's being matir it. It's brought completely separately. So therefore, you're not chayiv on this for pigul. And Rab Shimon is saying this in all circumstances. It doesn't matter if it was actually placed on the mitzaira on the day, together with the asham, or it was done later. Either way, because it could be done later. So therefore, the din of pigul is not shayach here, similar to what Chachamim said before. Rab Meir says, chayav and olav mishum pigul. If this loig of oil was brought and was placed on the mitzaira on the same day together with the asham, so because it's only placed on the mitzaira after the asham, and the asham is sort of being matir to then use this oil, so therefore that's where the din of pigul applies. When you have a part of a carbon that's becoming mutter through the avodah of the carbon, if it's done with the machshava of pigul, instead of becoming mutter, the chiyuv of kares takes effect. Right,
what is offered on a different day?
Again?
Rav Meir just like, what if it be offered on a different day, not together with the korban?
So that's the Rab Meir holds. It doesn't make, if it's offered on a different day, then it's pashut that the chiyuv of pigul does not take effect because it's completely separate.
Yeah.
Rab Meir is saying that when it's offered on the same day, then pigul will take effect because now it's part of the carbon and therefore it's becoming mutter through the carbon, so pigul could take effect. Because when it's brought on the same day, then it is the blood of the asham that's matter. After you place the blood on the mitzaira, that's when you place the oil. And when you're done with that, then it's matter to eat from the oil. So it comes out that the carbon is being mattered to eat on this day, and that's where the chiyuv of kares of pigul takes effect. Okay, this is one part of the Mishnah. This rule regarding pigul, again, the point here is when there's something else that's being matter to eat or to do whatever it is with this part of the carbon, that's the part of the carbon where pigul takes effect. But if it's a part of the carbon where there's nothing else that's being matter it itself just has to be burnt on the mizbeach, then if you went ahead and ate it, then there's no pigul that takes effect on this. Any part of the carbon that there's something that's matter it to go ahead and do this stage of what has to be done with the carbon, and that's bein la adam. whether there's the carbon that the avodah is being done to be matter then for the person to eat this part of the carbon. Bein lemizbeach, or there's the avodah that's done with the carbon that then allows you to go to the next stage to be makter on the mizbeach, parts of the carbon. Chayav and olav mishum pigel. That's what you chayiv on it for pigel. So ha'oila, by the carbon oila, there's no eating for the person. By the carbon oila, it's all burnt on the mizbeach. So dama, when you complete spraying all the blood of the carbon on the mizbeach, matir as besar al mizbeach. So that then is what allows you to go ahead and bring all the meat of the carbon to be burnt on the mizbeach. So therefore, regarding this basar, there is a pigel that could take effect. If you eat from it, you're going to be chayiv kares, because the blood is matir this, and then when you have the machshava of pigel, instead of being matir it, pigel takes effect. And the hide of the animals of the oila goes to the kainim. So if you eat from this, then you'll also be chayiv pigel, because the zrika of the dam, when you complete the avodah of the zrika of the dam of the oila, that's matter for the kainim to use the hide. So the pigel takes effect on that as well.
But the oil is not to be eaten; it's just offered to Hashem.
True, but if the person went ahead and ate it, besides the isser that is being over, that you're not supposed to eat from the oila, he'll also be chayiv kares for eating from it. Oila sa'if, an oila, a bird, dama mater es besara la mizbeach. So the blood that's squeezed out on the mizbeach, it's also mater, the meat to then be brought onto the mizbeach. So if you eat from that, you'll be chayiv kares for pigel. Chata sa'if, by the chata sa'if, which over here, there's parts of the bird that not only on the mizbeach, but the kainim eat from it. So dama mater as besara la kainim. When you spray the blood on the mizbeach, and you're done with that avodah, it's a matter. It's matter then the basar of this bird to be eaten by the kainim. So it's on that pigel takes effect. Param anisrafim, usirim anisrafim. When you have the bulls or the goats that are supposed to be burned completely mechutz lamachna, and you don't eat from it, so these are certain karbonis chatas where this applies. So daman mater, when you finish spraying the blood on the mizbeach, that completion of that avodah is also a mater. What is it mater? Es emureya and likarev. That now you take those sacrificial parts of the carbon to be brought on the mizbeach. So now those emurim that now became mutter to be brought on the mizbeach through the completion of the avodah of spraying the blood, it's on that the chiyuv kares of pigel will take effect. Rab Shimon argues and says, Kol she'enoi ala mizbeach achitzen kishlamim. Anything that you don't bring and you don't bring it on the outside mizbeach, like the carbon shlamim. So by the carbon shlamim, it is burnt on the outside mizbeach. You have to the blood that is. The blood is put on the outside mizbeach, and then you burn parts of it on the outside mizbeach, and not like what we just mentioned. Param anisrafim, siram anisrafim. You don't burn it on the outside mizbeach; it's burnt b'chutz lamachna. So if it's not done, so Rab Shimon is saying, if you don't have a carbon that's similar to the shlamim, that's burnt on the mizbeach chitzen like the shlamim, ein chayav and olav mishum pigel. Then the whole entire halacha of pigel does not take effect. Okay, so this concept of Rab Shimon is because the source of the din of pigel in the pasuk it speaks about shlamim. So therefore he says, just like the pasuk, the source of pigel is speaking about shlamim, it has to be a carbon that's similar to the shlamim. Only there is the halacha of pigel.
If it's not on the mizbech hachitzon, so it must be on the mizbech haptimi.
No, mizbech hachitzon. That's what it says. Mizbech hachitzon.
But it says einu. If
it's not, if it's not in the mizbech, it's we just had the example before the param anisrafim, siram anisrafim that are burnt mechutz lamachna.
Oh, okay.
Omar Ole, says the Gemara, Ole said the following statement. Kaimitz, when it comes to the kaimitz of the carbon mincha, that fistful that you take off of the carbon mincha, pigel, if it was done with the machshava of pigel, that it's going to be, that you're going to eat from this mincha out of its time, shehelu al gabi mizbeach, if that kaimitz was then brought up on the mizbeach, paka piguloi mimeno. The status of pigel that's on this kaimitz will be removed from it once it's brought onto the mizbeach. Now, we'll see, the Gemara will explain what Ula is trying to say with this. And now Ula proves this point, because im acherim maybe l'dei pigel, if it causes other things to become pigel through this, if the machshava of pigel in the kaimitz causes other parts to become pigel, right, so in other words, when you burn the kaimitz on the mizbeach, so then it causes other things to become pigel. So hu atzmai lekol shekain. So it itself should definitely be affected by it. that the pigul should be removed from it. Okay, so now the Gemara asks that this statement of Ula is like a riddle. What is he saying here? Maika Omar, what does Ula mean to say? What's the concept that he's saying here, that when you bring the kaimitz on the mizbeach, pigul is removed from it? And then the reason that he gives is also very strange. He says, if this kaimitz causes pigul for something else, then it itself should not be pigul, should become bottle of pigul. If you see that it causes pigul for other things, how is that a svara that it itself should become bottle from pigul? Okay, so the Gemara explains as follows. Hachika Omar, this is how you have to read what Ola was saying. If you would say that this kaimitz, when it's brought on the mizbeach, will not be accepted to be burnt on the mizbeach. In other words, you're burning it on the mizbeach, it's not kosher at all, it's going to be pigul even after you burn it on the mizbeach. So then, heich mevi acherim lidei pigul. How then would it cause the remnants of this carbon mincha, the shirayim, which you eat, how would it cause that to become pigul? It's impossible, because the halacha of pigul, this is Rashi's pshat here in the Gemara, the halacha by pigul is, when you have the machshava of pigul, the pigul takes effect only if all the other stages of the aveda were completed. Karvu kol matirov, when you completed everything else. So you had the machshava of pigul by the kaimitz, and then you have to burn it on the mizbeach. If you're going to say that burning it on the mizbeach, it's a kaimitz of pigul, and therefore you're doing nothing when you're burning it on the mizbeach, so then the pigul should not take effect. Elamai, what happens is, when you burn it on the mizbeach, so then the pigul status of this kaimitz is removed, and it's being burnt. It's being burnt bekashrus on the mizbeach. Because you completed the aveda on the mizbeach bekashrus, so therefore it can cause other things to become pigul. So therefore he's trying to prove this point from this, that it causes other things, meaning the shirayim of this mincha becomes pigul. It must be that the kaimitz itself, when it's burnt on the mizbeach, it loses the status of pigul that was on it is removed. Okay, so now the Gemara says, we understand the logic, the svara that he was saying, but my kamash malam. What was the point of all the statement? This that he's saying regarding the kaimitz itself, that the status of pigul on it is removed once it's brought on the mizbeach. What's the relevance of this halacha? If he was coming to say the ein chayav and olav mishum pigul, that regarding this kaimitz itself that's burnt on the mizbeach, if you're going to eat from it, you're not going to be chayav kares for pigul. So if that's the point, Tanina, that's exactly the halacha of the mission that we just learned. Elu dvarim she'ein chayav alei mishum pigul. These are the things that you're not chayav for pigul. And the first thing in the list is hakaimitz. The kaimitz, which it itself is burnt on the mizbeach, so you can't say about this kaimitz that there's something else that's coming to be materit. Adarabah, the kaimitz being burnt on the mizbeach is actually mater other things, but it's not that there's nothing to be that's coming to be mater it. So therefore, there's no chiyuv of pigul if kares if you eat from the kaimitz itself. And the same the Mishnah went on to say v'akteires v'alavayna minchas kainim Mashiach minchas nesachim v'hadam, all these things that if you eat from them, the chiyuv of kares of pigul does not apply. So therefore, if that's all that Ola was trying to say, that if you eat from the kaimitz itself, that there's no pigul, you don't need this logic of Ola, you don't need this whole thing. This is exactly the din of the Mishnah. So Ella, says the Gemara, Ola was trying to say something else. The im alu lo yerdu, that this kaimitz, once you had the machshava of pigul for this, you should not be maktir on the mizbeach. But if you did, once you brought it up on the mizbeach, you don't take it down, even though it's possible. It's not supposed to be brought, but once it's brought onto the mizbeach, you leave it there. This is a concept we had earlier in the Masechta regarding karbonis, that even if it's possible, and you're not supposed to bring it on the mizbeach, but once it was brought up, it's learned from here, if it's brought up, you leave it on the mizbeach. So that could be, I don't remember, okay. So the Gemara asks on this, Tanina, we learned this already in a Mishnah, it says, halom, if you have something which is puzzle, a part of the carbon that was left overnight, it becomes puzzle, or v'hayotze, it went out of the azara, or v'hatame, it became tameh, v'shenishchat chutz lizmanoi, it was shechted with the machshava of pigul, to eat it out of its time, or chutz l'mekaymoi, or out of its place. So it all becomes puzzle. You're not supposed to continue the carbon and bring it on the mizbeach. With him, although once it was brought up on the mizbeach, lo yerdu, you don't take it down anymore.
So what do you do?
So the question is, you leave it to burn on the mizbeach.
And then?
So the question is, how could you say that this is what Ola was coming to say regarding the kaimitz? This is a beferish Mishnah. You don't need Ola to say this. The Elo, you're going to say that maybe Ola is coming to say a bigger chiddush. The im yardo yalo, that if this kaimitz was brought onto the mizbeach, then you realized it's puzzle, and you took it off. Once it was there, you weren't supposed to take it off. You took it off from the mizbeach, but even after you took it off, put it back onto the mizbeach. Let it go and be burnt over there. because the status of pigul is removed from it once you put it on the mizbech. So it doesn't matter if you took it off, put it back on. Is that what Allah is saying? So the Gemara says, but Hanami Tanine, this we actually learned in a Mishnah that it says that this is not the halacha. It says Kishem Shem Allah Yerdu, just like the halacha is once it's brought under the mizbeach, even though it was possible you leave it there, you don't take it off. Kachem Yardu Lo Yalu. So too the halacha is, but once you did take it off, then you don't put it back on. So that can't be what Allah is coming to say. Says the Gemara, so what do we need? The statement of Ola 4 to say regarding this kaimitz, which is pigul. You're not supposed to bring it on the mizbeach, but Ola is saying that once it's brought onto the mizbeach, the status of pigul is removed. What is this needed for? Shamashla behen ha'or. If the fire already began burning this that was on the mizbeach, so once the fire began burning what's on the mizbeach, so over here, what he's saying is, Rashi says, it becomes lachmai shel mizbeach. It becomes like the mizbeach takes it as becoming its bread. It belongs now to the mizbeach. And therefore, in such a case, even if it was taken off from the mizbeach, you do put it back on the mizbeach. This halacha that the Mishnah says that if it was placed on the mizbeach and you took it off. Once you took it off, you don't put it back onto the mizbeach. That's if the fire didn't start yet burning it. But once mashlaban, the light, the fire that is started burning it, so now it becomes lachma, it becomes bread of the mizbeach, and even if you took it off, you put it back on. That was the point that Ola was coming to say. Yeah. But the Gemara says, if that's what Ola is saying, but hanami amr Ola chadazimna. Ola once said this point before. The Amar Ola said, Lo yishanu ela shaloi mashlo ben or. That when do we say this halacha of the Mishnah that a part of the carbon which is puzzle that was brought on the mizbeach and taken off. Once it's taken off, you don't put it back on. That's only if the fire didn't start burning it yet. But mashlo ben or, if the fire started burning it, so then yalu, even if you took it off, put it back onto the mizbeach. So Ola said this point clearly once before, so how can we say that this is what Ola is coming to teach here regarding the kaimitz? So the Gemara answers, no, there is something that Ola is coming to clarify here regarding this kaimitz. Because Mao, the Taimeh, I would think to say, Hani Mili, the when do I say this point that once the fire began burning it, so then even if it was taken off, you put it back on, that's Eiver the Mechaber. That's if it's a limb of an animal where the animal, it's all one piece. It's all connected as one. There, if it started burning, even a drop, a little bit, then it all becomes part of the kedusha of the mizbeach. It becomes the bread of the mizbeach, and even if you take it off, you put it back on. Well, it's the mifras. However, here we're talking about the flour of a carbon mincha, where the pieces of the flour are all separated one from another. Here I would say that this doesn't apply, and if it began burning part of it on the mizbeach, the other part that's not burnt yet, and it's separate, it's not like a limb, that's one piece. Maybe if you took it off the mizbeach, you should not put it back on. Kamash Malon, therefore Ola came to say this halacha that once the fire started burning it, even though the pieces of the flour are not all one piece, like a limb of an animal, you put it back on to the mizbeach. That was the halacha of Ola. Now, exactly how this fits into the logic that Ola says, this is a discussion in Mefarshim. Because Ola says this logic, he proves it from this, that you see that it causes pigul for other things. So therefore, you have to say that the pigul on it itself is removed. So in the conclusion of the Gemara doesn't clarify exactly how the logic of Ola applies to the point that he's saying here. So the Gemara, Amar Rav Achai said, based on the point that Ola said, Hilkoch, if this is true, so high kaimitz pigul, what happens if you have this kaimitz of pigul that is puzzle? You're not supposed to bring it onto the mizbeach. And you did. The palge machasa'ara, palge askea marocha. Half of it you left on the floor, you didn't bring it onto the mizbeach, and the other half you did bring onto the marocha, onto the fire of the mizbeach. Or mash labaya or, and it began burning that part that you did bring on the mizbeach. So then, you can bring the rest that you did not bring onto the mizbeach yet, you can bring it all onto the mizbeach. Just like Ola said, that if the fire started burning a little bit of it, even though the nature of the flour is that it's different pieces, but yet when it started burning a little, you could put the rest back onto the mizbeach even after you took it off. It's the same also if even only part of it was on the mizbeach and part of it was not. Well, once it started burning part of it on the mizbeach, the entire rest, you can bring it onto the mizbeach. Sagt the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yitzchak said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan another halacha related to this, that hapigol, when it comes to something which is pigul, or what's left over from a carbon after the time it was supposed to be eaten, and or something is tamei. These are three examples that if you eat from this, you chayav kares. So in all these three cases, shehelon legabe mizbeach, if it's brought onto the mizbeach, paka iser mehen, the iser of it is removed. So Rashi says regarding the pigul, it's like we said before, that even if it was taken off of the mizbeach, once the fire started burning it, so then you could put it back onto the mizbeach. And regarding Neiser and Tamei, what we're saying is that the Isser and the Chiyav of Kares that was on this piece of Neiser and Tamei, once it was brought onto the Mizbeach, if you eat from it, you're not going to be Chayav Kares. So the Gemara asks on this, Rav Chisda asks, Mari Dechi, the master of this statement, what is he saying? Mizbeach mikveh tara? Is the Mizbeach like a mikveh that purifies things that come onto it? Why should something which is tamei that's brought onto the mizbeach become purified? And you say that if you eat from this which is tamei, that you shouldn't be chayiv. How does the issa get removed just because it was brought onto the mizbeach? Amar Rab Zeira said, Amar Rab Zeira says, Shemashla behen ha'or. The case of here is that it wasn't only brought onto the mizbeach, but the fire began burning it. Once the fire begins burning it, it becomes the lechem of the mizbeach, it becomes food, bread of the mizbeach, and therefore the status of the issa that was on it before is removed. It changes in its status. It's lechem of the mizbeach. That's what this halacha is saying. Masav Rav Yitzchak Bar Bizna asks on this from what it says in a Braisa. The Braisa says that Acherim say, when it says in the pasuk, "V'tum asay olav," that there's tumah on this. What is this pasuk talking about? So as the Gemara soon is going to bring the entire Braisa. There's a few different opinions in this Braisa, and this is a Braisa that comes to explain what's the meaning of this pasuk, "V'tum asay olav." So you have the full pasuk here. Rashi brings the full pasuk. You have here on the side of the Gemara the full pasuk. It says, "V'habasar," and Ois Aleph, "V'habasar asher yiga b'chol tomei lo ye'achol be'eish yisarif habasar kol tar ye'echol basar," and then it says, "V'hanefesh asher teichal basar mizevach hashlamim asher lashem v'tumasa yalav v'nichras hanefeshim ameh." Right. So the pasuk is saying that you should not eat from a carbon that you are tamei. Or the actual lashon of the pasuk is v'tum asay olav. Now, what does this mean, tum asay olav? Does it mean that there's a tumah on the person? He is tamei, and therefore you shouldn't eat from this? Or maybe v'tum asay olav means that there's a tumah on the piece of the carbon that you're eating, and then the pasuk is saying you'll be chayiv kares. So Acherim comes and says as follows: that I know that this pasuk is talking about the tumah that's on the person, not the tumah that's on the piece of the carbon that you're eating. So again, Acherim say the lashon of the pasuk that says that there's tumah on this. The language of the pasuk is mashma as follows: Mi shetumah perachas mimeno. If this is a kind of tumah that now the tumah is still there, but that tumah could fly off of it, it could be removed of it. That has to be a tumah on a person, because only a person that's tamei. So now he's tamei, but he can go to the mikveh and be metired himself. Yatsa basar, therefore this is not referring to the basar of the carbon that became tamei, she'en tumah perachas mimenu, because once the basar becomes tamei, you can't dip it in the mikveh to take off the tumah from it. So therefore the lashon with tumasei olav, which is mashma, that the tumah is still there, but it could be removed. So what kind of tumah are we talking about? The kind of tumah that's on a person that could be removed, not the tumah that's on the basar itself. Now the Gemara asks on this, but the imi said, if you're going to say, if it's true what we said, that we're talking about the halacha, if the halacha that we said before is true, that when you take the basar of a carbon that's tamei and you bring it onto the mizbeach and the fire of the mizbeach starts burning it, so then it changes in its status, the tumah gets removed from it, so then arei tumah perachas b'menu al yidei or. So even regarding the basar of the carbon itself, once it's brought onto the mizbeach and the fire begins burning it, the status of the tumah changes, and you're not chayiv if you eat from it. So maybe the pasuk is talking about the basar. Answers the Gemara, Amar Rave al yedei mikveh kamrinan. The meaning of this drasha that Acherim said is a tumah that can be removed through going to the mikveh, and that doesn't apply to the basar. The fire on the mizbeach can remove it, but not the mikveh. Fragt the Gemara, how do we know to darshan this midi mikveh ksiv? Does it say in the pasuk v'tumasay olav, a kind of tumah that the tumah is still there but it could be removed? Is there any indication in the pasuk that it can be removed specifically through the mikveh by the basar? It's also a tumah that can be removed through the fire on the mizbeach. Elam Rav Papa. So therefore Rav Papa says the basar shlamim maskinon. This pasuk is talking about a carbon shlamim. The basar of the carbon shlamim, you have to eat it. It's not even brought on the mizbeach b'chlal. So therefore, regarding the basar shlamim over here, it's not right to be brought on the mizbeach. Therefore, it's not something that you could say about it that this is something that the tumah is on it now, but the tumah will be removed from it when it goes onto the mizbeach. This basar is not intended to go onto the mizbeach b'chlal. Ravina says the tumasay olav. The pshat of this drasha that Achedim said, that they are clarifying that tumasay olav is mi shetumah perachas mimenu, that it's a kind of tumah that's now here, but it could be removed. Who are we talking about? Keshu shalim. We're talking about a kind of tumah that's on a certain entity, that entity remains as is, whole and complete, and still the tumah could be removed from it. That's only a person. A person becomes tameh and he remains whole and complete, then he goes to the mikveh and he becomes tar. Yotza basar. But that does not include that, or rather, we exclude the basar that's davish ein tumah perachas keshu shalim. If the meat of the carbon becomes tamei, yeah, there is a way to remove the tumah if it comes onto the mizbeach and the fire starts burning it. But when the fire starts burning it, so then the basar is not as in its condition the way it was before. It's starting to be burnt. The tumah is not removed from it as is keshu shalim. Ela keshu chaser. Only once the fire burnt a little bit off from it. It says in the pasuk tumasay olav. When as is, and the tumah is still on it, but it could be removed. That could only be said about a human being, and not about the basar and the carbon once it begins being burnt on the mizbeach. Okay, so now the Gemara here will bring the entire brayse that discusses this subject. How do we understand this pasuk? So here's all the opinions in the brayse explaining the pshat on this pasuk. When it says v'tumasay olav, that there's tumah on it. What is it talking about? As I said before, the Gemara's suffix is v'tumasay olav. Does it mean that there's tumah on the person, and when he eats, when he's tamei, then he's chayav kares? Or does it mean that there's a tumah on the basar, and he's eating from the basar while it's tamei? So it's talking about the tumah saguf. The person is tamei. Akasav medaber. Atoy tumah saguf. You say it's talking about the tumah of the person, or yein ele tumah's basar. Maybe it is talking about the tumah that is on the meat of the carbon. So the first opinion here is that there's the Gzeira Shava that teaches me that this is not so. Nema kan tumasai uses here this term of tumasai. Nema la'alon tumasai boy. Then there's another carbon where it uses the term tumasai boy, where it speaks about the person that walks into the Beis Hamikdash when he's tamei, and there it's clearly talking about the tumah on the body of the person. La'alon betumas aguf. So just like there, it's speaking about the tumah on the body of the person. Akasim medaber avkan betumas aguf akasim medaber. So here as well in this pasuk, it means the tumah on the body of the person, and he ate from the carbon. Rabbi Yossi says that in the language of the pasuk, I could see that it's talking about the tumah on the person, because hoyel v'nemru kachim b'lashon rabim. The lashon of the pasuk, it says kachim lashon rabim because it says shlomim. Shlomim is a lashon rabim, and therefore, if it would be speaking about the tumah that's on the carbon, so it shouldn't say v'tumasei olav. It should say tumasei aleihem, also a plural term. But then v'nemru tumah b'lashon yachid. When it speaks about the tumah, it uses a singular term. So therefore I know it's not speaking about the tumah that's on the carbon. B'tumah sago fakasim medaber. It's only speaking about the tumah that's on the person that is eating from it. So you see it from the change in the lashon of the pasuk from lashon rabim to lashon yachid. Rabbi says, I see this from the pasuk that comes right afterwards. After the pasuk that was speaking about, it says there in the pasuk v'nefesh kisiga b'chol tamei b'tumas adam ha'behemet mei b'chol sheketz tamei, different kinds of tumas. Then it says v'ochal mibsar Zevochim asher l'Hashem v'nichrasa nefeshim ma'amer. So from the next pasuk v'ochal, I know that b'tumas aguf hakasim medaber. That in the pasuk before, it's also speaking about tumas aguf. Now, exactly how Rebbe sees this from the next pasuk, the Gemara is going to explain right away soon. Another opinion: how do I know in this pasuk that we're talking about the tumah of the guf of the person and not the tumah of the basar? So the last opinion here, Achedim Amru, this is the opinion that we brought before. Achedim say when it says v'tumasei olav, It's mashma that now the tumah is on him, but it could be removed. Mi shetumah peirachas mimenu. So that's only the person that the tumah could be taken off from him if he goes to the mikveh. Yotza basar she'ein tumah peirachas mimenu. That excludes the meat if it becomes tamei, that the tumah cannot be removed from it. As the Gemara explained that before. But now the Gemara explains how did the Rebbe learn out from the pasuk that follows. Omamar, so the Tan in the Braisa said that Rebbe says v'ochal b'tumas haguf hakasav medab. That in the next pasuk, I see from there that this pasuk is speaking about tumas haguf. My mashma. What's the proof from the next pasuk that we can now understand that this pasuk we're talking about is also talking about tumas haguf? Omar Rave, so Rave said that this is actually something very difficult to explain. And therefore he brings as follows: Kol kra d'lo mefarish le Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, a pasuk that's hard to understand, that Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi did not explain it, and v'chol masnite d'lo mefarish le Rav Zeiri, and also regarding a difficult brayse, if we wouldn't have Rav Zeiri that would come and explain this, lo mefarisha, there would be nobody that could explain it. And therefore he says as follows over here regarding this pasuk. What's the proof that the Braisa is saying from the lashon of the pasuk va'achal that this pasuk that we're speaking about v'tumasei olav is also speaking about tumas haguf? So these are psukim that are one right after the other. You see here on the side is that it's in Vayikra in Kapitel Zayin pasuk Chaf, and then there's the pasuk right after pasuk Chaf Aleph where it says va'achal. So he's proving from the next pasuk that I say that in the previous pasuk it's also talking about tumas haguf. How do you see this? So Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi says as follows: that I see in this pasuk of va'achal that there's something unique. The pasuk over there begins using a lashon nekeva. Why? Because the beginning of that pasuk it says v'nefesh ki siga. Siga is a lashon nekeva, and v'siyim b'lashon nekeva. And the conclusion of that pasuk is also in a lashon of nekeva. Why? Because it says in the end of the pasuk v'nichrisa hanefesh imameh. It doesn't say v'nichras. And then v'lashon zachar be'emtza. In the middle of the pasuk, it uses a lashon zachar, because in the middle of the pasuk it says va'achal. It doesn't say va'achla. At the nefesh 8 it says va'achal. So I see from that pasuk that I should also say regarding the pasuk before the betumas haguf hakasav medaber, that the pasuk is speaking about tumas haguf. Okay, so now what's the pshat and what Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi is saying here? So Rashi explains what's going on over here. Why is the Gemara b'chlal having a suffix regarding the pasuk where it says v'tumasei olav, whether that tumasei olav is on the guf of the person or on the basar? In the pasuk itself, if you look in the context of the pasuk, it's pretty clear that it's speaking about the tumah of the person. The pasuk there it says v'abasar ashiyiga b'chol tamei lo ya'achal be'eshisarev. Then in the next pasuk it says v'hanefesh ashateichal basar mizevach hashlamim ashel Hashem v'tumasei olav. Meaning the pasuk already completed the point about the tumah that's on the basar. And then the pasuk goes on to say, right before that it said already, V'habasar kol ta'ir yechal basar. And then it says, V'hanafesh. In the context of the pasuk, it's clear that it's speaking about tumas haguf, not the tumah that's on the basar itself. So why are we having a suffix about this? So Rashi says the reason is this point that Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi is bringing up here, because there's a discrepancy here in the lashon of the pasuk, lashon nekeva, lashon zachar. When it speaks about the nefesh, it says nefesh asher toichal. In other words, when it speaks about the person, it uses lashon nekeva, and the same in the end of the pasuk, it says v'nichrisa nefesh lashon nekeva, and then when it speaks about the tumah, it says v'tumasai olav lashon zachar. So why is it saying lashon zachar if regarding the person, the nefesh of the person, it's using lashon nekeva? So that's why we're thinking to say maybe v'tumasai olav is not speaking about the person, which is lashon nekeva in this case. Maybe tumasai olav is speaking about a piece of the carbon that became tamei. So therefore, Rebbe proved that I see in the next pasuk the same thing happens. In the next pasuk also it switches from lashon nekeva to lashon zachar. So therefore, the diuk that you're asking that over here in this pasuk it switches from lashon nekeva to lashon zachar is not enough of a reason to change from the simple context of the pasuk that the tumah is on the body of the person. That's how Rebbe is learning this out. Okay, now since the Gemara brought here this statement that Rav said that Zeiri, we need Zeiri to explain a difficult brayse, so the Gemara says, what is this difficult brayse that we need Zeiri to explain this? Masnite, the difficult brayse is as follows. The Tanya, there's a brayse that also speaks about when a person is tamei and he should not eat from kachim, or actually we'll see it's going to speak about not eating from truma and meiser when he's tamei. And here you have a brayse that's mamish written like a riddle, and Zeiri is going to explain it. So the price says, the Tanya, im nemru kalos. If we would be speaking only about a case which is more lenient, Lama nemru chamurais. Why does it have to say a case that's more severe? Vim nemru chamurais. If it says the case that's more severe, lama nemru kalais. Why does it say the case that's more lenient? So the answer is, if it would say the case that's more lenient and not the one that's more severe, then I would say, ala kalais balav. For the case that's more lenient, you only over on a lav, but vala chamurais b'misa. But on the cases that are more stringent, I would say that there you chayiv more. You chayiv misa for eating from this when you're tummy. So lekach nemru chamurais, and therefore the Torah has to write the case that's more stringent, more severe, to say that you're not chayiv misa in that case. And if it would only say the case that's more severe, and it wouldn't say the case that's more lenient, then I would say that Allah chamuras yechayiv, that only for this case that's more severe, yechayiv if you eat from it when you're tummy. But valakala is potter. But in the case that's easier, that's more lenient, you would be potter. Lakach nemru kala is therefore has to say the case that's more lenient. The Tiller is the lashon of the brayse. So as I said, the lashon of this brayse is like a riddle. What's the kalais? What's the chamurais? And what's going on over here? So the Gemara tries with two suggestions, and it shows that however you're going to try to learn this brayse, it seems like it's impossible to understand what this brayse is saying. And Zeiri will come and explain this. Says the Gemara, my kalais or my chamurais. When it's speaking over here about the tumah, okay, like I said, this brayse is speaking about the tumah. When a person is tamei, they shouldn't eat. So, but what is the kalais and my chamurais, and what is the chamurais that we're speaking about that he shouldn't eat from it? So, if you're going to say what we're talking about is kalais is meiser and chamurais is truma. What's considered to be more lenient is meiser, and what's more severe is truma. And the reason is because by meiser, when you go to the mikveh, even if you don't wait until sundown, you can eat from meiser sheni. But by truma, after you go to the mikveh, so then you have to wait until ahead of shemesh, until the sun comes down, as it says in the lashon of the pasuk. Only then could you eat from it. In the lashon of the pasuk by meiser, it says that you come out of the mikveh. The lashon of the pasuk there is, you have here the pasuk on the side. It says kim rochatz b'sari b'mayim. You go to the mikveh, that's it. You can eat. But then it says another pasuk. Right afterwards, actually, b'negeh to ba shemesh v'toir. That's b'negeh to truma. You have to wait until the night. So if we're going to say over here that what's the two things we're talking about? Kalais and chamurais means meiser and truma. So what is the brayse saying? That I would have said, if it would only say that you shouldn't eat from meiser when you're tamei, and it wouldn't say truma, so I would say truma is more severe. So therefore, if you eat from meiser, you chayiv, you over on a lav. But if you eat from truma, I would have thought to say that it's more severe. So here you chayiv misa. So that doesn't make any sense. Why? Because hashtanami habemise. So the first question here is the halacha actually is. It's actually clear in the pasuk that one that's tamei that eats from truma is chayiv misa. That pasuk that I just mentioned before, ba shemesh, which is talking about the truma. The pasuk there goes on to say v'lo yisu olav chaytu meisu b'kichalalu. So you chayiv misa over there. So what is it saying? That the Torah writes misa in order to teach you that you're not chayiv misa for truma, but you actually are chayiv misa there. Also, the whole logic that the Braisa says in the first place doesn't make sense if you're going to learn it this way. What does it say? If the Torah would not tell you that it's also to eat from the trumeh when you're tamei, so then I would say that I learn out this, that it's also to eat from it from meiser. But then I would say, I'm learning it from meiser. But trumah is more severe, so therefore for trumah you're going to be chayiv more than meiser. You're going to be chayiv misa. How do you say such a thing? The rule always is, whatever you learn out from a source, you can't learn out more from what your source is. So if you're learning out the isser of trumah, to eat from it when you tell me from meiser, so then if by meiser there's no misa, so then by trumah there's no misa. So Ella says the Gemara, kalais means, maybe we're going to translate the word of kalais and chamurais, not in regards to what you're eating, trumah versus meiser, but rather it's talking about the tumah. What level of tumah is the person tumah? Kalais is tumas sheretz. When a person is only tummy, tumas sheretz. And chamurais is tumas meis. When a person is tummy, tumas meis. Because in the pasuk, when it speaks about not eating, it mentions there both. It mentions over there the tumas sheretz, ashiyiga b'chol sheretz, and it also mentions that if the person is vanigeh b'chol tummy nefesh. The Torah says whether you tummy tumas sheretz, which is a lighter tumah, you go to the mikveh and you can eat that day or that night, or the tumas meis, where you have to wait 7 days. It's a much more severe tumah. So that's what the term of tumas, kalis, and chamuris is saying in the Braisa here. Now, says the Gemara, okay, so but regarding eating what? are we talking about? If we're talking about a person that's Tomei Tumas Sheretz or Tumas Meis, and he's eating from Trumeh, so then the halacha is Idi v'Idi b'Misa. You actually chayev Misa b'dei Shemayim when you eat, whether with this Tumah or that Tumah, you always chayev Misa. The Braisa here is saying that with the Kal, it's a lav, with what's Chomer, it's Misa, but if it's Trumeh, you always chayev Misa. So additionally, lekach nemru chamura is the belav. The Braisa says that the Torah wrote the more stringent one to say that it's only a lav. Habemisi. But if you're eating from trumeh, so then you always chayiv misa, regardless of what kind of tumeh it is. So that cannot be what the Braisa is speaking about. Now, if we're speaking about a person that's tomeh on these two levels, whether the lighter tumah of sheretz or the more severe tumah of mace. And it's referring to what? A person that now wants to come and eat from the maiser. So what does the Braisa say? If it would not say chamurais, then I would say ala chamurais b'misa. That for chamurais, for the more severe tumah of tumas meis, yechayev misa. Ha mitumas sheretz ka'asya. But if it would not say the tumah of misa, that a person became tummy from a mace, but you would only be learning it out from tumas sheretz, how are you saying that then for the Tumas Misa I would be chayiv Misa b'dei Shemayim for this? Or again, from the Tumas Meis, that is, a person would be chayiv Misa b'dei Shemayim. Again, Hamid Tumas Sheretz Ka'asya. You're learning it out from Tumas Sheretz, and therefore, like the Gemara asked before, V'daya leba minadin liyas kenidin. If it would only say the Tumah of Sheretz, and there you're not chayiv misa, so then the same would have to be for the tumas meis, that you're not chayiv misa. You can't distinguish between them if you're learning out tumas meis from tumas sheretz. So if by tumas sheretz is no misa, then there wouldn't be any tumas misa by the sheretz, by the tumas meis, that is. So basically, the Gemara showed you, no matter how you touch the word kalais and chamurais, either way, it's hard to understand what this Braisa is speaking about. Okay, so let's finish the Inyan. So now, how did Zeiri find a solution to understand this Braisa? So Zeiri says as follows. You have to sort of combine both points together here. And it works as follows. Kalois means tumas sheretz. When it says in the Braisa, kalois, it's taka referring to the lighter tumah, the tumah only of sheretz. Chamurais means tumas meis. When you're tamei with the tumas meis, a more severe tumah. And this is how you read the pshat in this Braisa. If the Torah would write the halacha only of Tumas Sheretz, v'nemar meiser v'trumem, and it would say the halacha that if a person is Tomei Tumas Sheretz, he should not eat not from meiser and not trumeh, v'loi nemra Tumas Meis, and the Torah would not say the halacha spelled out regarding a person that is Tomei with a more severe tumah, the Tumas Meis, then I would say that kalois, ala kalois belav, that if you're tomei with the lighter tumah, with it, which is tumah sheretz, and you're eating from the meiser, which is something which is more light more lenient regarding someone that's tomei, in order to be allowed to eat from it, that you're over unallowed from it. But vala chamurais b'misa. But as you see from the pasuk, if you eat from the trumah, which is more severe, while you're tomei tumas sheretz, you chayiv misa. Okay, so what do you see from this? That even when one is tamei with a lighter tumah, the tumah of sheretz, but if he's eating from trumah, which is chamura, which is more severe, then you chayiv misa. If that's all you would see in the pasuk, so then I would say umidekalois ala chamurais b'misa. If when he's tamei with the lighter tumah of sheretz, but if he eats from trumah, which is more severe, so then the Torah says you chayiv misa for this. So now how about if it would be the other way around? Chamurais name yalakalais b'misa. So how about if the person is tamei with a tumah chamura? So over here the word chamurais means that he's tamei with the tumah of misa, and he's eating from meiser, which is kalais. Maybe here there should also be misa. I said just like I see, there's two things here. There's the tumah, and there's what you're eating from. Just like I see that the Torah says that if you're tummy with the lighter tumah, but if you eat from the more severe thing, which is trumah, that you chayiv misa, so maybe it's the other way around, that if you're tummy with the more severe tumah, so then even if you're eating from what's more lenient, which is the meiser, I should compare and say that here you should be chayiv misa as well. Therefore the Torah has to spell out the halacha regarding tumas meis, that when you're eating the meiser and your tummy, even tumas meis, you're still going to be over only in a lav. You're not going to be chayiv misa for this. That's the pshat in this brisa. So Zeiri solved this brisa, which was a riddle. Zeiri was able to solve this.